And welcome back, rugby fans, to Rugby411. As always, I'm your host. My name is Joshua Shibata, and this is our review of the penultimate week of the 2024 MLR season, week 15. All these spots in the playoffs have been claimed. All 8 spots, 4 in the East, 4 in the West, have been determined. There are still a couple of spots that can be moved around, but all 8 teams have been locked into the playoffs, so we know who's going in, who unfortunately did not make it, which makes the last week a little bit of a dead week. There are, like I said, some games in the Eastern Conference that do play some importance. Interestingly enough, the Western Conference, we're going to see pretty much just rematches, or game ones of what will end up being the rematch in the playoffs, which again, I'll explain a little bit later. I'm not doing a very good job of explaining it right now, but we have a lot of movement in this week's power rankings. We have a new number 1. So it was a very interesting week of MLR action. We almost had a record-breaking game with the most tries scored ever in a game. Very close. It was a record-tying game, but very exciting. And then a couple of lackluster games, and then quite a few upsets. So again, a lot of action to cover in, again, the penultimate week of the 2024 season. If you have not seen my videos, again, you're kind of late. We're almost done with the season. But if you haven't seen my ranking, where I rank them is all based on purely what you do on the pitch. It's not about how you are ranked in the conference, which, especially in this week's rankings, there are a few teams that are higher than some of the teams that are higher than them record-wise, but it's because of the teams that they've been beating. And again, if you're a lower-ranked team that beat a higher-ranked team, which we've had in this week's weekend's games, you're going to move higher. If you're beating down on a lower-ranked team, which every team has done so far, you're not going to move at all, if at all. So, again, it's not based purely on who has the better record. It's really based on who is doing the best. And, man, there's a couple of teams that they've ridden that momentum all the way up. And, unfortunately, some teams whose momentum has shifted quite a bit. So, again, we'll go into all of that right now. Unfortunately, still stuck in that number 12 position, and I don't think it's going to change, sadly, throughout this season, is one of the new kids of the year, Anthem Rugby Carolina, are your number 12 team. Again, another actually pretty strong performance, barely losing to Chicago, 29-38. But again, just don't have enough in the gas tank to finish a game. But again, lots of potential. In this game, like a lot of their games, Anthem scores first in the first couple of minutes. Chicago, though, comes right back in with a beautiful 95-meter interception try by Tomasio Alacio. The score is tied, though, 19-19 at the half. So again, Anthem was in it. But then in the second half, Chicago kind of blows away the score, try by Julian Dominguez, and then 2 tries scored by Dylan the Butcher Fawcett, which I'll get in a little bit more detail when we get to Chicago. But that puts away the Anthem Rugby 29-38, falling to Chicago. Then, in a try-fest of a game, the Dallas Jackals, who end up sliding down from number 8 all the way to number 11, lose a surprising loss to the Utah Warriors, 46-50. That's right, 46-50. Surprisingly enough, it is not the highest point score total in all of MLR history. It's actually the 4th highest game. I'll reveal what the highest scoring game ever in history of MLR, but it is a record-tying score, a record-tying number of tries scored in the game. And again, I'll go into that a little bit more detail later on. But shockingly enough, Dallas loses to a team that, by all accounts, pretty much were done. I mean, Utah is not in the playoffs. They were eliminated last week along with LA. But man, you wouldn't know by the way they were playing. And let's get into it. So, Dallas scores 4 tries within the first 20 minutes. 4 tries within the first 20 minutes. you're thinking Dallas is totally going to run away with this game like we all thought. And then Utah scores 3 tries back to get within the lead. And then Kieran McClay gets this beautiful interception pass, goes 100 yards. And Utah is up 33-24 going into the second half. Utah scores 7 straight tries. They score 45 points after falling behind 4 tries to 0. Utah puts up 7 straight tries. It was remarkable. I don't know what happened to Dallas in that first part of the second half. Of those tries, that included 3 of the 4 tries by Michael Manson. Michael Manson has been a phenomenal talent for Utah. He is by far, I don't know if I can call him Rookie of the Year because I think he might have played on another team beforehand, but if he hasn't, definitely a front runner for Rookie of the Year, or at least a player who is so influential on his team. Unfortunately, Utah is not in the playoffs, but Michael Manson has been a phenomenal player to watch. Because of those 4 tries, he is now the try leading scorer in this season with 12 tries in the season, taking that full number 1 spot. Dallas scores. You think Dallas is out, though, by this point. Unfortunately, Utah gets a yellow card, and because of that yellow card, Dallas ends up scoring 3 more tries of their own to get within 4 points, but in the end, just wasn't enough. Utah was able to hold on to the victory, 50-46, 16 tries scored total in that game, 8 for Utah, 8 for Dallas. If it wasn't for the conversion kicks, that is what made the difference, and Utah is able to walk away with the impressive win, 50-46. And like I mentioned before, that is not the highest scoring game ever in the history of MLR. It's actually the 4th highest. The highest scoring game ever was a game 3 years ago between Old Glory and Rugby New York, back when they're around Rooney, where the score was 59-49, 108 points total. That is the highest scoring game ever, but that is also the highest scoring try total, 18 as well, 16 tries as well. So this game that was just played between Utah and Dallas ties that record, but does not break the record for the most points scored. But either way, crazy game. If you are all about tries and not about defense, this was the game for you. Unfortunately, with that loss, even though Dallas is in the playoffs, can't be a very good feeling for Dallas in this game, losing to Utah the way that they did. That, again, slides them down from number 8 to number 11. Sliding down 1 spot from number 9 to number 10 is Rugby Football Club LA. Again, like the Utah Warriors, they also were eliminated from the Western Conference last week. Does not help then to go on to lose to one of the stronger teams in the Western Conference, Seattle Seawolves, up in Seattle, losing 29-12. And it's just, again, LA is a team, and again, I'm of course watching a little bit closer to that team than any other team, but LA has a lot of potential. Unfortunately, they just cannot finish when they have the ball. A lot of turnovers by both sides, but the difference was that a lot of the turnovers that LA makes were in the Seattle 22. When it looks like LA was ready to strike, to score, they would just lose the ball, whether it's a knock-on, whether it's just a fumble pass, whatever it is. LA, numerous times when they turned over the ball, it was in the Seattle 22. The times that Seattle lost the ball, they weren't in the LA territory. So that's what made the difference. Regardless of that, the game was really close. It was 10-5 at halftime. LA was only down by 5 points. Unfortunately, in the second half, Seattle, that's where they pretty much kind of ran up the score a little bit, scoring 2 tries near the end, and sealed the game away, 29-12. Also 2 for LA, not making excuses, but they suffered a lot of injuries during that game alone. Bruce Yoon got hurt, Wilton Rebolo got hurt, Matt Heaton, who's one of the top players for LA, he also walked away with a head injury assessment. So just a lot of injuries. They didn't have Niles Saunders playing for them. They don't have Jordan Chait playing for them. Dan Hollinshead hasn't played for a couple of weeks. It's just LA is a team that's completely beaten and bruised, and unfortunately just doesn't have the gas to go a full game with one of the top teams. And so again, that's why they fall down to number 10. I'm not looking forward to their next game against Utah, especially with the way Utah just went toe to toe with Dallas and um, put on 8 tries in one game. I think LA, the most tries that LA has ever done is 6, but I don't think that's going to happen next week. We'll see, but I really don't. Going down to number 9, another team that fell down, that actually moved up a spot, is the Miami Sharks, moving from number 10 to number 9, defeating Old Glory 17-12. This was a very important game for Miami. They had to win this game, but the kicker is they could not let Old Glory score any kind of bonus points. At the beginning, Miami was able to capitalize on a yellow card by getting a couple of tries and a penalty kick. They were up at the half, 17-0. And then, unlike the Utah-Dallas game, it became a complete defensive game in the second half. Only 1 try was scored in the second half of the game, and that was at the 70th minute. So 30 minutes of pretty much just a defensive slog. And then 1 try was scored by Old Glory that got them within 5 points. And unfortunately, even though Miami did win 17-12, that 1 bonus point secured Old Glory into the playoffs, and that prevented Miami from making it. So really just bad luck for Miami. Miami's looked very impressive this season. I feel out of the 3 new teams, Miami, Anthem, and LA, Miami has looked the most impressive, but mind you, Miami also has had the most time to prepare for their team. They already made the announcement of the franchise a year prior. Probably around this time, we knew last season that Miami was going to be a thing. LA literally got together maybe a month before the season started. Anthem was probably about the same amount of time. So it really shows you the difference when you have a little bit of prep work to have the team work together. But again, Miami very impressive, just barely missing out on the playoffs. So that is a shame, especially considering Miami did win. With that being said, Old Glory, who's number 7, does fall a spot to number 8. But because the game was pretty close, I didn't feel that Miami dominated Old Glory. So I didn't have Old Glory slide that far down. And Miami is still just a little bit below Old Glory. Then, of course, at number 7, we talk about the Utah Warriors, who put a dominant performance against Dallas, though they almost lost in the end. But still, for a team that literally weeks ago, their management group sent out an apology to the Utah Nation fans, apologizing for how bad they lost that week. To turn it around like this, again, a great game. Like I said, if you didn't know anything about Utah's situation, you would think Utah was a pretty dominant team by this performance. It's just too bad that it's already way too late for the season. It's near the end of the season, but man, an impressive performance for Utah. And again, does not matter that Dallas is in the playoffs and Utah isn't. This is based purely on what you do on the pitch. That win earned Utah a jump from number 11 all the way up to number 7. Also, too, in that game for Utah, got to make a shout out to Joel Hodgson, who broke the 100 point plateau in this game, making 107 points. He's the 4th highest point scorer of the season, just behind guys like Mac Mason, Jason Patros, and Jason Robertson. So a pretty good group of people to be associated with Joel Hodgson. Then, a surprising loss, and this one, dropping down from number 5 to number 6, the New England Free Jacks, your reigning defending MLR champions, losing to a surprisingly hot NOLA Gold team, 27-16. I'll be honest with you. I really didn't get the hype of NOLA. I don't know how NOLA got as good as they did, but man, this game, I don't know if it was just New England, kind of like, hey, I mean, you know, we're in the playoffs, what's the big deal? But man, NOLA looked good in this game. New England got an early penalty kick, but NOLA scored 3 tries in the first half to lead 19-3 in the first half. In the second half, NOLA ended up scoring again, even after getting a red card. But then New England started to come back. But Rodney Iona, who has been a phenomenal player for NOLA Gold, was able to kick a perfect 50-meter penalty kick to keep the score beyond 10 points, 27-17, to allow NOLA to get the win. NOLA, with that win, does secure the number 2 spot in the Eastern Conference. They can't go any lower than 2, but they do have the chance, if New England loses next weekend, to jump to the number 1 spot. So that means NOLA still has a lot to play for, as well as New England. But man, an impressive showing by the NOLA Gold. Then, of course, number 5, dropping down from number 1, your former number 1 team, in a surprising loss to the San Diego Legion, 37-24. And man, it was an impressive showing by the San Diego Legion. San Diego starts off the game scoring 13 unanswered points. Usually, San Diego is never in the lead in their games, but this one, they were pretty dominant throughout the game. Houston was able to score a try on their own from Drew Wild. This is after Drew broke his nose, and he still was playing. I mean, that just shows you the caliber of rugby players. Drew Wild was a bloody mess, and yet he still was able to score a try. Got a few really good tackles in as well. Tian Lutz got a possibly the try of the week, a beautiful kick pass to himself to score. That was one of 2 tries by him. We'll talk a little bit more about the injuries to San Diego when we get to San Diego, but you do have to talk about the fact that Matt Guiteau did have to step out in the game, so he was replaced by Harris Rutherford, a Scotland cap player who was phenomenal in this game, led really the reason why San Diego was able to beat Houston. Houston got a penalty try to get within 3, but then San Diego scored a try in the end to put the game away, to also prevent Houston from getting any kind of bonus points. 37-24, an amazing performance by San Diego, breaks Houston's 8-game winning streak, and knocks the number 1 team down from number 1 all the way to number 5. Number 4 is your Seattle Seawolves, who again defeated LA 29-12. Again, you're defeating a team that's kind of near the bottom. Didn't feel it was a really dominant performance, so I didn't think that it warranted Seattle to move up. Definitely didn't warrant Seattle to move down. Chicago, a similar situation as your number 3 team, defeated Anthem. If anything, Chicago actually looked a little shaky in that game, so I kept them at number 3. San Diego is your big jumper, moving all the way from 6 up to number 2 after beating Houston. Big shout out to Harris Rutherford, again, Scotland cap player who was the stand-in for a hurt Matt Guiteau. He was a perfect 5 for 5 off of the tee, 14 points. Big reason why San Diego was able to beat Houston. But again, very concerning to have Matt Guiteau have to hobble off of the field. He's been finding some injuries in the recent past weeks. Also, Eagles cap Marcel Brackey was also hurt in this game for San Diego, had to be carried off. Hopefully, we do get a couple of off weeks because the USA Eagles teams are going to be playing against Scotland and Romania the 2 weeks following the last game of the season. So we have a 2-week gap before we go into the playoffs. So hopefully that 2 weeks will give San Diego and all the other teams in the playoffs a little bit of chance to recoup. And of course, we meet with Houston dropping down, we do have a new number 1 team, and that is the NOLA Gold. Again, with a very impressive performance against the New England Free Jacks. I don't know how this happened, but NOLA is the surprise team, at least for me, of the season. Really impressive, really dominant, and like I said, even though they are behind New England in the standings, that win over New England really cemented them as the number 1 team, and so they take the top spot in my power rankings. So this is our power rankings going into the last week of the season. Again, we'll review all those games in the next video. Not a lot for the Western Conference to play. Again, it's going to be kind of interesting. All the Western Conference games end up going to be repeated in the playoffs. In the Eastern, there are things to fight for. Again, NOLA and New England still have a chance to switch their rankings, as well as Old Glory and Chicago have a chance to switch their rankings. I'll explain all that as we get into that next video. But these are my rankings, and yeah, looking pretty good. Now, let's talk about, of course, everybody's favorite, our pick'em pool, and your pick'em winner of this week, bam, is the Reviewer812. That's a name I have not said. I don't believe I've said much this season, but man, he was a constant high scorer in our prior season. Had the top score, 7.25 points out of a possible 17, so he gets the golden cap. Behind him, surprisingly, Sunshine, where have you been all season? Number 2, tied 6.5 points with SD Cal Guy, and then USA League and Union Rugby Fan with also 6.5. So all three of them are tied for second. And then at the very bottom of the top 5, JZF, who is our league leader right now. CrossFox unfortunately got the wooden spoon. Now, because of what happened this week, bam, our top 5 has changed quite a bit. Of course, JZS still a commanding lead at the top with 98.16. Harry, who again has been in the fight, moves up 2 spots to number 2, 87.91. And then with that golden cap, the Reviewer812 jumps up 7 spots. He was number 10 last week, is now number 3. Just goes to show you guys, it is not over. One really good week could easily get you up into the top 5 to possibly the top 1. And a huge jump for the Reviewer812, 87.41. Going up 1 spot was our former leader, Sarai, 87.08. And then dropping down, unfortunately, 4 spots, BT Woodrow, 87.08, down to number 5. Now, as I mentioned before, anything can happen, but JZS, 98.16 points. He is ahead of Harry by 11, let's say 10.8 points. Okay? Now, typical week of rugby action can get you at most 17 points. So, like I said before, it's not out of the realm that somebody can possibly take down JZS. But it's looking, don't want to jinx anybody, but it's going to be interesting for this final week. And then, yeah, I'm not going to worry too much about the bottom 5, but that is our top 5 of our leaderboard right now. So, as I mentioned before, if you are in my pick'em pool, like I said, you saw how the Reviewer812 just jumped up. Every point counts. Don't give up on this last week. Though this last week, it is going to be interesting to see how teams approach the week. I'll talk about that in my next video. But again, thank you very much, as always, for checking out my video. I hope you liked it. I appreciate your support, and I'll see you on the pitch.